Welcome, friends! I am back, here to finish out the 25 factors. Actually, today we'll be covering part 3, but I'll also be publishing part 4 as well, so it's kind of a double whammy, if you will, today. Alrighty, without further ado, let's jump into part 3. In part 1, we covered things that are not in our control. In part 2, we covered things that are sort of in our control, and today we'll be talking about the things that are totally in our control. And as you can see, this is an incredibly lengthy list, so I ended up splitting it again into 3 sections, which are things that are in our control. Rapid fire, I'll just spend a minute talking about these little things, and then part 4 will primarily focus on senior year. Before we begin, if you guys could toss this video a like and subscribe, that would really help the channel out. I'm working really hard to publish all kinds of knowledge and tips that I wish I knew when I was in early high school. So if you guys find this material helpful, please consider tapping that like button and subscribing to my channel. Thanks so much. Okay, class rank and GPA. Class rank is not that important. I've talked about this in previous videos. And the reason it's not so important these days is because valedictorian actually doesn't have as much power as it used to. I mean, to an extent, colleges can see if you're ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, and if it's a really big school, then sure, it definitely helps. I can't say it hurts. But also, a lot of these bigger public schools nowadays will hand out valedictorians to the top 5% of the class, and so you end up with dozens of valedictorians, and it kind of loses its value. The other thing you guys should note is it really worth it going from the top 5% to the top 1%, right? In order to narrow that gap, you would be spending so many extra hours just to chase this marginal kind of benefit. As long as your GPA is sufficiently high, and I mean top 20% honestly. I mean, some of you guys could slide by with top 30%. What's honestly more important is the edge, and I've talked about that in previous videos. I'll also make like a brand new video just totally discussing the edge. An important question to consider is what is the relationship between class rank, GPA, and edge? And I started working with younger students recently in 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, and we spent a lot of time discussing how to structure your courses for the next 3 to 4 years. I would say that by the end of 9th or 10th grade, you should know if you're humanities or STEM. And then it's really important to take AP classes or IB, depending on whatever system you're using, that show you're really interested in that material. Does that make sense, guys? So let's say my edge is architecture. So I'd be taking a lot of design classes, art classes, more humanities, maybe a little bit of physics in order to show that, yes, I am really taking this edge seriously. The edge will not work at all if you haven't even taken the classes. That just raises a ton of question marks and gets the college admissions officers kind of scratching their heads. Let's assume that you've checked all the boxes and that your edge is just totally on lockdown. Then edge has actually a really strong chance of beating out the valedictorian. And if done properly, you actually spend less time working on your edge than the valedictorian who is like grinding and trying to get to like the #1 rank in their school. The last thing I'll touch upon is context, and then we'll move on to the next factor. Basically, context means if your school offers 20 APs or IBs, it's gonna look really bad if you're not taking at least 10. Some go crazy and take like 13, 14, 15. I don't think that's super necessary. I think above like around the 10 to 12 range is pretty solid. And what really matters more is, like I said before, are you just taking random APs, AP Chinese, and then AP Chemistry? No, just really focus on the APs that best align with your edge. Sometimes this gets very tricky because schools don't let you take APs until your 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. And so what I would encourage you guys to do actually is you can self-study for AP exam. You buy the textbook, you study it on your own, and then you take the AP in May. And you get a 4 or 5. I'm working with students and they were really surprised. They didn't even know that this was an option or a possibility, but it is. You can do it. And if you did that 1 a year, then you would have 4 extra APs. That's pretty good. And self-studying, like you have the whole year. I mean, you can just get a little textbook and break it down, watch Khan Academy. The next factor we're gonna discuss is volunteer and work experience. And this is a really gnarly factor because it connects and ties back to so many of the other factors. But before we move on, we really gotta take a look at this article written by this Dartmouth admissions officer. It's called Check This Box If You're a Good Person. And the article was published a few years back. Let me pull it up real quick. So here's the article, New York Times opinion piece, and it was written on April 4th, 2017. I'll attach the link in the description, but for now, I'll just skip to the good stuff. Let's take a look at these 2 or 3 paragraphs. The most surprising indication of kindness I've ever come across in my admissions career came from a student who went to a large public school in New England. He was clearly bright, as evidenced by his class rank and teachers' praise. He had a supportive recommendation from his college counselor and an impressive list of extracurriculars. Even with these qualifications, he might not have stood out. But one letter of recommendation caught my eye. It was a school custodian. The custodian wrote that he was compelled to support this student's candidacy because of his thoughtfulness. This young man was the only person in the school who knew the names of every member of the janitorial staff. He turned off lights in empty rooms, consistently thanked the hallway monitor each morning, and tidied up after his peers, even if nobody was watching. This student, the custodian wrote, had a refreshing respect for every person at the school, regardless of position popularity, or clouds. Long story short, colleges care if you're a good person. And one of the best ways to show this is through your volunteer work. You don't even have to say, I'm a good person. If you write down that you volunteer 4 hours a week at this cancer research hospital, or you play with kids, you can talk about it again in other components of your application, and we'll get there in a second. A lot of these colleges are always trying to figure out, like, what is this student's impact on their community, impact on their society? And basically, they don't, college admissions, don't just care about how you interact within a school environment or how you're leading, but also the greater society and world as a whole. The other thing is there's another factor called character qualities, right? And we want to be able to show that this person is, that you are loyal, right? Like, you are kind, you are hardworking. It makes for a bad essay if you're like, I am kind, I am hardworking. You don't want to directly, blatantly say that. Another really added benefit of the volunteer and work experience is that it just lends for such amazing essays. I've read essays where a student ended up becoming an assistant manager at McDonald's, and he talked about working there and how it revealed a lot of the injustices that he had previously been blind to in his community. He assumed that a girl was late because she was lazy, and it turns out that she was a single mom and she was taking care of her daughter and couldn't get childcare. Finally, and this is a really fascinating point, menial labor is very, very good. One of the best things you can do as a sophomore in high school is work at a gas station, work at Walmart, work at Olive Garden. This is crazy, but I've been hearing about wealthy families when they apply to colleges, they'll purposely work in these menial jobs in order to convey humility. Like, that's kind of mind-blowing. But let's flip the switch. Let's say your socioeconomic status is relatively low and you don't have as many opportunities. We've talked about summer programs and you just can't afford them, or you didn't apply, or you have to support your family. Colleges are not going to count that against you. Like, guys, my Common App essay, which I will reveal in another video, by the way, is all about me working in my parents' Chinese restaurant. So yeah, who would have thought that working at a gas station could help you get into Harvard? Another factor that you guys will see colleges list is this talent/ability. All right, suppose Kevin is your college admissions officer and I'm reading your file. How can I know for sure that this kid is any good at the saxophone? Real simple. I look at your awards. What kind of local, national, international awards have you won? If you've won an international saxophone competition, that's it. All I need is that one line in your application. And I'm like, this guy is legit. Enough said. You can also show off your talent or ability based on the summer programs that you've been a part of. So again, let's say you're into music and you end up doing this composition seminar at UC Berkeley. Same thing with extracurriculars. If you're playing an instrument, let's say the violin, and you're just part of a quartet versus your first chair in the Miami Youth Symphony Orchestra. There's a big gap between those two extracurriculars. You can rely on recommendations. You can have your teacher, your coach, talk about your attitude and your talent and ability on the fields, off the fields. Now that I'm thinking about it, I didn't originally have this in my notes, but if you are working on a certain art or sport and you combine that with a volunteer activity or work, that doesn't just show your talent ability, but it also shows your character qualities, right? Like, I could be really great at football, and then I also started a youth league to teach kids. Maybe I created better equipment in order to promote safety. I'm always thinking in this kind of like initiative mindset. I guess that's a natural segue to one of the last things I'll talk about today, which is the character/personal qualities. I would say that it's pretty much the same as talent and ability, but the one difference is that you can actually talk about these character qualities in your essay. Again, I'll just take the example that I totally made up on the spot. Oh man, okay, this youth football league, youth flag football league, and maybe you are a running back and you had a very serious injury, right? Maybe you were all-state and you ended up having a season-ending injury. And so you started an initiative that teaches kids how to play football, but also you made equipment and trained them in techniques to make tackling safer. And you can write about that struggle in your essay. It's like, wow, this kid really cares about his community. You know, it's almost like a heroic journey, and that's really, really important. We'll talk about that in the essay. Think of yourself as a protagonist when you write the essay. Okie dokie, I'm close to the end of the video, and I don't want to make this any longer than it has to be. So I'm going to try to cover all 5 of these factors in just under a minute. When it comes to test scores, you guys want to get the highest score possible. The easiest way to do this is to take multiple practice tests in the weeks leading up to your exam. I would recommend taking at least 1 a week. Minimum, take 6 practice SAT or ACT exams. If you're ambitious, try to take 8, 10, 12. Easiest way to improve your score. Arts portfolio, you either have one or you don't. Make a website, showcase it if you've won an award. If you haven't received external validation and your art might not be very good, then it will hurt you to try to showcase it. Languages spoken, you either speak multiple languages or you don't. The more you speak, the better. Level of college interest. Some colleges take this very seriously, like UChicago. Others don't really care, like Yale. Know if your dream school cares about this factor. If they do, try to get into a summer program at the school, try to talk to alums, professors, everything you can to get closer to that university. Resume. A lot of students make the mistake of attaching 2 or 3 page resumes in these weird formats. Don't do that. I've attached my resume in the description. Just follow that format and you'll be good to go. That is all for part 3. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to sauce that like button and consider subscribing if you enjoy this content. Thank you guys so much, and I'll catch you in part 4.